I'll give you 5 seconds to figure out what's wrong with this parlay. Go. Time's up. Hey, I'm Dave Loughran, and I'm going to show you all the ways sportsbooks bait us into placing unprofitable same-game parlays. But stick around to the end, because I'm also going to show you the secret to winning them. Here's the truth, though. It isn't much of a secret at all. It's simply taking information that's already available to us and using it against the books. Or better yet, it's doing the exact opposite of what the sportsbooks want us to do. Like that parlay you just saw. It was a winner, so what could possibly be wrong with it, right? Well, no. It was bait. Except in this case, the fish actually got to eat. But eventually he'll bite the hook just like all the others do. See, what the books are doing is they're chumming the waters with these type of lines, right? They know that bettors are going to flock to these seemingly easy alt overs, parlay all of them together, despite the odds being terrible, because in their minds, none of these legs can possibly lose. But no matter how certain you are that each of these legs is going to win, you're still relying on 4 different outcomes, all within the same game, and you're getting them at plus 202 odds. So there are 2 reasons that this type of bet isn't going to be profitable for anybody long term. The first thing is sportsbooks are very much aware that parlay bettors love taking overs. So they can simply place less favorable odds on the overs and know they're going to bet them anyway. And oftentimes they won't even offer under bets on alt lines. So they can essentially set the over odds however they want. Just look at anytime touchdown props or a player to hit a home run prop. It's very evident. And the second reason is the same game parlay correlation tax. If you don't know what that is, this will be the most important part of the video for you. A correlation tax on same game parlays simply means that the books are giving you worse odds on every leg that you add into this parlay because each leg is not independent of each other. They're all playing in the same game, right? So that means that every outcome is in some way connected to the other. And the books are going to take that into account when they calculate the odds. Like parlaying overs on Nikola Jokic assists and Aaron Gordon points, or overs on Lamar Jackson passing yards and Zay Flowers receiving yards. They're all connected, right? The more points Aaron Gordon scores, the more likely Jokic is to rack up more assists. Same thing with Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers and their connection through the air. And while nobody fully knows the exact science and how sportsbooks calculate these correlated odds, what we do know is that they underpay us whenever we combine correlated events. Here is the awesome part though. All of these sportsbooks don't calculate correlation into their odds the same way. And sometimes some of the books are flat out wrong. And that is a huge advantage for us as the bettors, if we're just willing to take a little bit of time to figure out which of these books is wrong. Take a look at this same game parlay I placed a while back. And as a matter of fact, I used this in a previous video as well. It was a 3-leg Buccaneers parlay, basically banking on a big game for Baker Mayfield and a connection in the end zone with Mike Evans. And whether this won or not is unimportant. It did win, by the way, but it's unimportant. What matters is where I bet it at. What was the price that I got it at? And especially, what was the price compared to the other books? So I ended up betting it at plus 580 on Caesars, which means the break-even point, and I'll explain that in a second, was 14.7%. Essentially, I would have needed to win that bet around 15% of the time to break even, assuming that I placed that same bet over and over again. But on FanDuel, that exact same bet was priced at plus 369, which means just to break even, assuming I bet that many times, I would have had to win over 21% of the time on the exact same bet. And I threw that formula for calculating break-even point on the screen for you guys so you can use it in the future, and I highly urge you to do so. Look, even if you don't know how to calculate the true odds on a same-game parlay by yourself, having this formula, being able to use this each time you put together a same-game parlay will at least give you an idea of whether or not the books are railroading you on the odds. And if you want to break all of this down into the simplest of terms, a $100 bet netted me $580 on Caesars, whereas that same $100 would have won only $369 on FanDuel. If every other book is offering you around plus 400 odds on the same parlay that one book says here, take it at near plus 600, why would you ever go anywhere else? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it was a good bet in and of itself, because for all we know, the fair odds on that bet could have been plus 650. But at the very least, you know you're on the right track. All right, so by now you can probably already see how powerful of an approach this is for betting same game parlays, because now we know the books don't calculate correlation the same across all of them. But it gets so much better than this, because we're about to talk about betting situational same game parlays. And that is where you can truly do damage to these books. Now, these type of opportunities will not arise every day, but when they do, they'll legitimately make, and this is not an exaggeration, for some of the best betting opportunities of your life. And this video is to help you understand how to spot those opportunities when they finally do present themselves. So the first thing about betting situational parlays is, like anything, you have to have an edge. And as you can probably already guess, that's a whole lot different than just blindly firing on overs for 3 different guys you think could have a good game, even though their odds are exactly where they should be. But these edges can show up in many different forms, so you have to be ready for all of them when they do. One example would be weather. Let's say you think inclement weather could really negatively affect the scoring in a game. Parlaying the unders could be a highly profitable approach, be it game totals, player props, or whatever it may be. But you have to be sure that the books haven't already baked this into their lines. You can't be betting these 3 hours before kickoff on a Sunday morning. Because if the books have already priced something in, you no longer have an edge on betting correlated outcomes. Because now at this point, all you'd really be doing is betting into markets where the sports books have already adjusted to the news. And now the edge is no longer on your side, it's on theirs. And remember what I just said there, because it's going to come up again in a minute. You always want to get in while the edge is still on your side, because it will eventually flip to theirs. Here's an example I love to use all the time, and I explain it to people like this often, where the book's uncertainty about a player or a game falls heavily into our favor, and we actually have an edge. So last season in the NFL, Gerard Mayo, at the time head coach of the New England Patriots, said he was benching Ramondre Stevenson in favor of Antonio Gibson because of Stevenson's early season fumbling woes. And then a day later, when FanDuel released Stevenson's rushing yards prop, it opened at 38.5 yards. Not only that, these were the alt lines that DraftKings opened up with for Stevenson on the week. Stevenson ended up finishing with 89 yards on the day and outtouched Gibson 16-7. Now, if you know anything about football, you know coaches do this as a motivational tactic all the time. And we also know that as a first-year coach, early in the season, that Mayo was almost certainly going to go back to Stevenson in a very winnable game. Not only because Gibson isn't 3-down back material, but because the only player going into the season with a higher fumble rate since 2021 than Stevenson was Antonio Gibson. So if you went into that game thinking that Stevenson would be fine and that the books were wrong on this, which they ultimately were, you could have parlayed Stevenson's over on rushing yards, even alt overs, with an anytime touchdown, and also thrown some Gibson unders into the mix as well. And yeah, the correlation is still baked into the odds here, but the odds were so far off in the beginning that it didn't actually matter. The edge was yours. And look, this is just one example of a situational same game parlay, one where I knew going into it that I had a pretty significant edge. But I could talk about these forever, because the profitability is legitimately unmatched in sports betting if you know where to look. Take this same approach to the hardwood in an NBA game. And let's say that Joel Embiid, he's a perfect example, is dealing with an illness, but he's still expected to play. But then a beat writer tweets out that this illness is seemingly bothering him more than originally reported. And you start thinking, I don't even know if he's going to make it through the whole game. And if he does, he certainly won't be close to 100%. But the key here is that the books haven't adjusted to that yet. So instead of just betting Joel Embiid unders, why not throw them into a same game parlay with, say, Tyrese Maxey and Paul George points overs? And here's the coolest part about doing something like this with same game parlays. Let's say Joel Embiid ultimately gets ruled out and he never steps foot on the floor. Okay, well now all of the Embiid legs within this parlay void, but the Maxey and the George props don't. And look, this doesn't mean these bets are always going to work out. For all we know, Joel Embiid could go out there and have a Michael Jordan style flu game, or he could go out, play terribly, but Maxey and Paul George are bad as well. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. All that matters is if you have an edge. And the purest way to know if you have an edge over the sports books with every bet you make is whether or not you're getting closing line value on it. And that means being able to find spots where sports books are wrong and bet it before they can adjust the odds back out of your favor. If you bet that Sixers same game parlay at plus 650, and by the time the game tipped off, it was plus 380, no matter whether it wins or loses, you objectively made a good bet. And you should start evaluating your betting success based on that over whether or not a random same game parlay that you slapped together won or lost, because that is not an indicator of future success or failure whatsoever. Honestly, Closing line value is exactly why the tools we have over at OddsShopper have been so profitable, because everything we're betting has a higher chance of winning than the odds the sportsbooks are giving them to us at. Like with the parlay generator, where you're generating dozens of plus EV parlays in seconds and one click adding them straight into your bet slip and locking those bets in before the books can move them against us. And that's why every plus EV bet notification over at OddsShopper is sent straight to our phones through the app, so we're always one step ahead of the books. It's the simplest way to bet profitably, and more importantly, to discovering our own edge. So what do you have to lose? Try it out, 100% free for your first week with that link in the description or the pinned comment, and make sure to download the app in the process. Appreciate you guys watching as always. I hope you found something valuable from this video, but before you go, remember this. Think of these as tools that you're throwing in your toolbox. You're not going to get these opportunities popping up every day. Books aren't going to improperly price correlation on every single parlay, and these situational spots come up every so often. But now, hopefully when they do, you'll be ready.